You're listening to Leading Up with Udemy. This podcast is your guide to developing your skills as an emerging or seasoned leader. I'm Alan Todd, your host and the Vice President of Leadership Development at Udemy. Together, we can work, lead, and live differently to create a better world. For our last episode of Season 6, I'm turning the hosting mic over to Udemy Chief Marketing Officer, Genefa Murphy, who you might remember from my interview with her earlier this season. We're sharing with you today a conversation between Genefa and McLaren Electric Racing's Ian James, all about developing high-performing leaders who consistently push boundaries and achieve excellence. So, without further ado, take it away, Genefa.
Hello, everyone. I'm super excited to be joined by Ian James, Managing Director, McLaren Electric Racing and Team Principal, Neon McLaren, Formula E and Extreme E Teams. That is possibly the longest title I have ever had to do an intro on.
Genefa, you nailed it. Absolutely spot on. So I think that may even be a first for
I managed to do it all in one breath, Ian. So there you go. I'm taking that as a sign of success. So without further ado, we'll talk a little bit about today's discussion. We're going to cover three key areas: high performance and high purpose culture, motorsport and sustainability, and continuous learning and improvement. And I'm super excited for you all to hear a little bit about McLaren's approach to something called marginal gains. So, Ian, I'm actually going to pass it over to you, and I'm just going to ask you to do a little bit of an intro and give us some background behind the title.
Well, Genefa, firstly, thank you very much indeed. It's a real pleasure to be here with Udemy. Genefa did an amazing job of introducing me. I don't think I could do a better one, so I'm not going to try to in that respect. Suffice to say that I'm a huge motorsport fan, have always been one, and I'm passionate about what we do here. It's a privilege to lead the team that makes up McLaren Electric Racing, and as Genefa mentioned, both our Neon McLaren Formula E teams and Extreme E teams. I think during the course of this session, we'll probably find out that I'm a bit of a jack of all trades and master of none, but hopefully plays to the strengths that I need in the role that I've got, certainly as a team principal of the team. But great to be involved in the sport. I think as we go through the course of this session, hopefully you'll get a bit more of an insight into what it is that we do, a little bit more about Formula E and Extreme E, and of course about the partnership itself. So Genefa, excited to get started.
Wonderful. Well, I always enjoy my conversations with you, Ian. So now we talked about one of the topics that we're going to start with is this notion of high performance, high purpose culture. So why don't we actually start with defining it? How do you define high performance for you and your team?
Well, I think with sport and with motorsport in particular, it's actually really easy to define high performance because our goals are set very simply as going out there and winning the championships. But having said that, a focus is often on the drivers, the engineers, the mechanics of the team. But there's a huge number of personnel behind the scenes back at the factory who work in HR, finance, the commercial side of the business, communications. And we need to be aiming for high performance in each one of those areas to make sure that as a team, we can achieve those goals and ultimately win those championships. Just as an example, at the moment in Formula E, for just over a year now, we've had a cost cap in place. And that means that every euro that we spend actually is crucial to our performance as well. So again, if the finance team isn't able to give us the control, that transparency, then we're not going to achieve those goals that we set ourselves. And the other thing about high performance is it has to be sustainable. There's no point in going out there and aiming to win the championship for a year. We want to do it for year after year. And therefore, the way that we set up within the business, the way that we actually set our culture is crucial to achieving that as well. So high performance starts from that overarching goal. Again, we're in a very lucky position because it's dead simple for us. But behind the scenes, it takes every single team member, every single element of the business to be able to deliver on that goal.
Yeah, and I love that. And I love the fact that just getting some exposure to you and the team, that sense of team is really, really important. It really comes through that it is everybody. It's not just the people who are on track. It's the whole organisation who are working together. And then I love that consistency point as well. I talk about something called sustainable hype. It's great to have a hype moment, a race win or whatever it might be, but you want it to be sustainable over time. So super cool to hear some of those things. So it's not always easy to develop and maintain that culture of high performance. So how do you and the McLaren team develop and maintain a culture of high performance and high purpose, especially maybe when there's adversity?
Well, I think the word that you use there, which is absolutely crucial, is culture. The culture within the team is crucial to us, again, delivering that performance and ultimately achieving those goals. And it's something that we discuss a lot within the team. It's something that's not particularly unique to McLaren. It's not unique to motorsport teams, but is across the world of sport, something that's often this much vaunted no blame culture. And what that essentially means is setting up a situation where we've got a certain amount of psychological safety. It means that we can push the boundaries. We can really push those performance envelopes in the way that we need to succeed, but do so in a way that we feel safe to be able to sometimes go across those boundaries and make mistakes as well. Because if you're going to be in that environment, if you're going to innovate, then you are going to make mistakes. And what we need to understand is that in doing so, we're not going to be blamed. We're not going to have the finger pointed at us. Of course, we're going to be held accountable, but we're held accountable as a team as well. And that cultural element is absolutely crucial. Now, one of the things that's actually quite difficult is once that's been set up, making sure that it's kept fresh, making sure that we actually take the time to have that check and balance and ensure that we're moving in the right direction as well. And that's not always an easy thing to do. So one thing that we've done within the team is to actually ensure that we come together on a reasonably regular basis. So typically once a year. If we could do it every 6 months, we certainly would do. But use that opportunity to reinforce through the team what we want to achieve from a cultural aspect and make sure that we've got the right measures in place to achieve that as well. And it's not always an easy thing to do. As I say, everybody's incredibly busy. There's never a perfect moment in time to bring everybody together without having some kind of disruption within the organization. But it is so crucial to do that. And we've done that since day one within the team. I was very fortunate in the fact that we sort of set this up from a blank sheet of paper. So it's been relatively easy to set that right from the outset without having too many legacy topics. But I do believe strongly that it's one of the key elements that has allowed us to be successful in the past, and it will allow us to continue to be successful in the future as well.
I love that commitment to saying, listen, we've got other things going on, but we know that connecting the team, bringing the team together is super important. So we're going to do it and we're going to manage the disruptions. I think that's a really cool concept. Now, you already talked about the no blame culture. Another really interesting thing about how you all make decisions is, and I'll see if I can get this correct, making decisions from the highest point of knowledge, even if that may be someone different from the most senior leader. So can you explain that a little bit and how that could potentially apply to, obviously we've got lots of people who are not in the world of motorsports joining us today, but maybe if you can just talk a little bit about that context, because I think that is one of your concepts for decision making in high pressure situations.
Well, I think we started this off, or I started off by saying I'm a bit of a jack of all trades and master of none. So if we're reliant on the sort of levels of seniority within the team, then we've got a problem on our hands. Ultimately, the team on the Formula E side of things is actually very small. We have 30 operational staff members at the track on an event. 3 of those are actually the drivers, so 2 main drivers and 1 reserve driver. So the number of personnel that we have through the engineering team, through the mechanics and so on and so forth is actually very low. And what it means is each one of those individual team members needs to understand very well what their job is and how to execute the tasks that they have. And it's no good if we end up with something that's too convoluted, too complex, and ultimately every decision being passed up the chain and then being passed back down again for an answer. So we need to make sure that we have, first and foremost, the right people with the right skill sets on board. But those people then also need to feel empowered and enabled to actually take those decisions where necessary. And it's very rare, actually, that I'll get on the radio during a race event, during a session, and really have any input. And that's because I trust my team implicitly. On the very rare occasion I'll get on the radio, it's usually because as engineers, they love to get into the detail and sometimes forget that there's a driver out there having to manage a race and what have you. So occasionally I'll just remind them that situation is actually going on. But it's been fascinating to see that evolve over time as well. And it's also important to continue to check in and see whether the processes and procedures that you've put in place to be able to manage that are actually appropriate for the point in time that you're at. And things could continue to evolve. One example of that is that decision point in the past has often been with the engineers. So if we're in a race situation, the strategy is obviously absolutely crucial. And what we've tended to do is to ensure that we're able to give the instruction to the driver to orchestrate the race as it goes through. A couple of years ago, we actually changed the car. So the cars that we race today are different to those which we had in the past. And it ended up changing the style of racing that we had as well. And what we've actually found out, if I'm completely honest, a little bit later than I'd have liked to, but through observing the races that we've had in the past 18 months, is actually the engineers that were taking some of the strategic decisions within the race aren't anymore at the highest point of knowledge. They were in the past. But actually now it's the driver that's often in the situation where they've got the highest point of knowledge. Their experience, their learning and understanding of the race strategy is evolving. But at the same time, they're best placed also to really take certain key decisions. So we've actually switched things around a little bit and tweaked it in the recent past. And we're starting to see our performance improve in that respect. So as I say, the one thing, yes, it's important to understand where that highest point of knowledge sits and make sure that the decisions are taken by the right individuals in the right positions. But it doesn't necessarily mean that those positions or those decision points are going to be the same today as they are going to be tomorrow. So that constant check and balance is absolutely crucial as well.
How you empower the team is I think that ability to adapt and change and say, hey, in the past we did this, but now something else works better for us or works differently. So I think that's a really great point. How do you keep your team energized, especially when things are going well? That's easy to do. How do you keep the team energized throughout the time and respect that no blame culture as well?
That's a really, really good question. And it's not an easy thing necessarily to do. As you've just said, when things are going well, when you're winning, everybody's on a high and it's easy to keep up that momentum. We've all experienced things and anybody in any sport will go through times of poor performance, and keeping the motivation up, keeping the team moving in the right direction is absolutely crucial at that point in time. Obviously, again, having those clear goals and understanding what we're aiming for is absolutely crucial, and not losing sight of that. But also understanding what it is that you're able to do to change things, to make sure that we can make improvements to continue to move in the right direction is important as well. And I think it's absolutely crucial to then communicate that and explain it throughout the entire organization. So even if there's one particular area or element of the organization maybe that we need to focus on and tweak, don't just communicate within that area, but communicate across the organization so that people have the trust and faith to know that actually we're not just going to be satisfied with the status quo, that we are going to be able to challenge things and move things forward. And that challenge and the ability to challenge, that comes all the way back through to that no blame culture as well. Because only through engendering that can you make sure that actually people have the confidence to speak up, the confidence to challenge each other, but do it in a respectful way that's actually going to move the whole team forward. And I think in doing that, you can ideally keep the motivation going with the trust that we're actually going to make change and move things in the right direction to get back to where we want to be to perform. And then if the results come off the back of that, then again, it starts to get easier.
I love that. I love that notion of trust and transparency. And you're doing something in a department over here, but let this department know as well, so that people don't make up their own assumptions as well about what might be going on or not be going on. So that's a really cool thing. Okay, so we're going to pivot a little bit. We did say that we were going to talk a little bit about motorsport and sustainability. Sometimes not words that people associate together. But I think it's incredibly important. You all are doing incredible and amazing things. So why don't you talk a little bit about how McLaren approaches the challenge of reconciling the consumption of motorsport with the global focus on sustainability? I know this is something you're passionate about.
Yeah, I think it's a great topic to tackle head on, and I think we do need to tackle it head on. I think it would be naive to think that they make for comfortable bedfellows. I think between motorsport and sustainability, there's always that challenge of we're involved in a global sport. We travel all over the world. We're very lucky to be able to do that. But at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we're doing that in a way that is moving towards a position where we can be as sustainable as we possibly can be. First and foremost, I think that's why McLaren is involved now with Formula E and with Extreme E. Formula E has really been groundbreaking in its approach. It's not only the first motorsport, but the first sport that's been net zero carbon since inception and continues to move in the right direction from that perspective. But also, if we take a look at Extreme E, what that sport has done now for equality in terms of making sure that we've got a format that really brings both male and female drivers together on a level playing field is absolutely crucial as well. And then aside from that, we as McLaren need to make sure that we're also moving things in the right direction. We often talk about marginal gains in the sports sense from a performance perspective when we spoke about the performance on track before. We also need to apply that philosophy to what we're doing on the sustainability front, because through those marginal gains, we'll continue to move things in the right direction. I'll give you one example. The last race that we actually took part in was in Shanghai in China. Great to be back in China, but obviously it's a long, long way away from where we're based in the UK. And one of the decisions that we were able to take is to say, okay, we've got those 30 operational staff that I mentioned before out at track. We also have what we call a remote support room back at base where we're allowed an additional 6 personnel. But the FIA, the governing body of our sport, allow us to flex between those 2 different locations. So we were able to take a decision to actually locate 2 additional engineers back at base. We had 8 in total, and then have 28 operational staff traveling to the race. And just through doing that small change, we're actually reducing the number of team members that's flying out to that race. It helps us then just move the needle a little bit in the right direction in terms of reaching those sustainability goals. And that's just one example. If we take many, many, many different examples of that over the year, we can actually make a tangible difference to our footprint and to sustainability as a whole as well. So that's very much in focus. And lastly, we need to be data-driven in what we do. We do that on track. We do that in terms of sustainability as well. McLaren on the Formula One side was the first team to actually launch a sustainability report, and we're doing that now on an annual basis. And our entire motorsport portfolio is wrapped up into that. So it's something that we're passionate about and something that we're very much going to be very transparent about going forward as well.
I love that. I want to come back to the sustainability point, but you'd started talking a little bit there about the marginal gains and using data, right? So can you just talk a little bit more about that, about how McLaren uses data analysis after races to identify the specific areas of improvement, even if they seem small? Because I was amazed when I attended Formula E, the amount of data that the driver and the team have to process is phenomenal. So can you just talk a little bit about that and how you leverage it?
Data is everything in motorsport. It doesn't matter what series you're involved in. That's how we learn. That's how we drive things forwards. It's what the engineers and the whole team feed off. So the more data we have, the better, and the more accurately we can then process and understand that data, the better we'll do as well. And interestingly, I think in Formula E, just to bring that back around to sustainability again, it's become even more crucial. So when we start a race, we start with about 60% of the energy that we're actually going to need to deploy during the race itself, which means that other 40% comes through actually regenerating through braking events and so on and so forth. So not going into too much detail, but actually the strategies that we employ there, they're incredibly reliant on that data, because we don't go to these circuits year after year, or we're not typically able to go to any of the circuits in between the races either. So we're using that data in our simulation programs as well to make sure that we're as best prepared as we can be for the next race. But data is nothing without the analysis and the expertise and experience to be able to analyze it as well. And this is where the structure that we've put in place to actually debrief and make sure that we can understand that data, but also in a way understand the nuances of how to interpret the data is absolutely crucial as well. So the minute the driver gets out of the car, in fact, sometimes while they're still in the car on the radio, we'll already be talking about that data, processing it, and making sure that we get the experience of the engineers, the mechanics, everybody else involved in understanding how we can then utilize that to improve things going forward. And it was fascinating. I was actually at a test last week in the middle of Wales, in the middle of nowhere, where we were testing our Extreme E car. And we had a new engineer who's come and joined the team. But it was fascinating. He was actually watching the car through a pair of binoculars in terms of how it behaved. And he was taking his experience, what he was observing, and then almost correlating that with the data that we were getting off the car as well. And in doing so, he's accelerating that learning and that process that we were going through. So it was fascinating to observe that. So long story short, data absolutely crucial for what we need, but it's nothing without that expertise and experience to be able to interpret it.
Amazing. Excellent. I love that. It's great to be able to hear how you all are just thinking about the data, thinking about how you use it. And then I think the other interesting part as well is creating that balance between looking at the past of what data we've got and then focusing on how we go forward. So we're already nearly up at time. So I'm going to do a few rapid fire questions, if that's all right with you, Ian. So I'll go to that one. First one, how do you ensure a balance between analysing past races and staying focused on the future?
I think, not an easy thing to do, because our races can often be 2 weeks apart, which means that there's a lot of pressure on us to make sure that we can get that analysis done and then put any corrective measures or improvements in place for the next race. And in fact, actually, this weekend's race in Portland that we're about to head off to is a double header as well. So you'll even have an opportunity from Saturday night to very, very early on Sunday morning to take that data and make sure that you utilize it in the best way possible to make any improvements. I think in terms of making sure that we strike that balance between that historical data and taking that forward then and preparing for the next race, it comes down to the structures that we have in place. And I think we mentioned about the briefings before, we mentioned about them taking place as quickly as possible in a timely fashion. We're very, very disciplined about how that works and how that's employed. And it's one of the things that you very rarely see people get grumpy within the team. But if people turn up late to debriefs, there are certain fines imposed and so on and so forth. So that discipline is absolutely crucial. And if we do that in the right way, then I think we can achieve that balance that's required.
Nice. I like that. I mean, there's something that comes with holding people accountable and having, you mentioned it before, having the respect for your other teammates as well to turn up promptly to those debriefs. So next quick question. As we think about the future, are there any specific sustainability initiatives or partnerships that you're excited about?
Yeah, I mean, all sorts of things that are going on in the background at the moment. Here at McLaren, we're partnering with some really exciting initiatives, from the Great Barrier Reef to just all sorts of things that are going on. But actually, one of the things that I'm probably most excited about is the future. We have a great graduate program here, bringing in people often from underrepresented backgrounds now, who are bringing in a completely new perspective on the challenges that we face and how we should tackle those challenges. And I think from a sustainability perspective, that's probably one of the most powerful opportunities that we have at the moment. So we're looking to leverage that to the max. We've got some great talent on board already, and that program's just going to grow and grow. So that excites me.
Fantastic. Okay, so last two. How did you find your passion? You said you're a passionate motorsport enthusiast. Is it just always been there, Ian?
You know what? I think it has from before I can remember. I grew up around cars. It was something that I was infected by. And it's interesting. People often ask me now about, the growth of electric motorsport and when it's going to take over Formula One, which is very much at the pinnacle of motorsport. I feel that actually the two can coexist very happily together. They serve slightly different purposes at the moment. And I think that's a great opportunity. So, having grown up around cars, grown up around motorsport, being a complete nerd when it comes to all of that, again, I'm very, very privileged to have ended up in the position that I am in at the moment. And what a great time to be involved in it. The world of motorsport at the moment is is really on a high. And it's, just good fun to be involved in that environment.
Fantastic. Okay, so final question. As we wrap up, we always ask this question at Udemy. So what are you curious about and what are you learning now? Can be personal or professional.
Wow. Really good question. The one I'm going to do a personal one, actually. So what I'm actually learning at the moment, although I need to carve out some time, so I think it's going to be the flight to Portland for this one. I've got to do a number of courses in preparation for a sailing certificate that I'm going to take later this year. And the reason I'm doing that is because I've got a young family. We love skiing in winter. And that for me is my happy place. That's the time when I can switch off when I'm at the top of the mountain. My summer sport is scuba diving, but it's not the most social of sports. So this year we've decided to give sailing a go. So we're going to go away with the family. And I think actually having something like that to focus on and concentrate on is my ideal form of relaxation. So, and it's so important to get out there and have that opportunity to switch off and recharge as well. Don't tell Zach I've said this, because he'd see it completely the opposite.
We'll cover you. Don't worry. Yeah.
Thank you. So that's what I'm going to be focused on in the near future.
Absolutely fantastic. Well, I have thoroughly enjoyed getting to hear from you, Ian. A big thank you for being with us today. And if you want to hear more from Ian, Ian has recorded a course which we'll be launching in the next couple of weeks around how you accelerate excellence and unleash high performance. So thank you, Ian. Thank you to all of you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks again to Udemy's own Genefa Murphy and to Ian James for sharing his insights on the podcast. Follow Leading Up, a podcast from Udemy Business, wherever you find your podcast. Follow the show so you never miss a new episode. And if you like the show, leave a rating or a review. We love the feedback, and it really helps us to find new listeners. To learn more about Leading Up or how Udemy can help you develop leaders at scale and move business forward, visit business.udemy.com. The Leading Up podcast is produced in partnership with Pod People. Our original theme is by Soundboard.